They said it would be over by Christmas, that it would be fast, glorious, a chance for honor. But what came instead was 4 years of hell, 4 years of poison gas, rotting trenches, shattered bodies, and the slow death of an entire generation. Behind glittering palaces and royal banquets was a Europe built like a powder keg, armed to the teeth, full of pride, paranoia, and ambition. He assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, along with his wife, Sophie. The world barely blinked at first. Political assassinations weren't new, but our leaders believed it would be a quick conflict. Over in a few weeks, it had the largest and most disciplined army, the most advanced weapons, and a detailed invasion plan called the Schlieffen Plan, meant to crush France quickly, then pivot to the east to defeat Russia. Germany was fast, ruthless, efficient. It stormed Belgium, slaughtered civilians, burned towns. French and British troops, unprepared for the sheer speed and firepower of the German advance, were pushed back hard. What they got instead was the bloodiest and most brutal war humanity had ever known. Soldiers dug into the earth, creating miles of trenches filled with rats, lice, blood, and despair. The Russians had the numbers, but not the equipment. British naval blockades were choking Germany's trade routes. German civilians began to go hungry, in which Germany tried to convince Mexico to attack the U.S. President Woodrow Wilson declared war on Germany in April 1917. German troops pushed deeper into France than ever before, but they were too weak. They couldn't hold the line. And then fresh, well-equipped American troops arrived. The tide turned. Food riots broke out. Yet Germany kept fighting. New weapons were introduced. Poison gas, flamethrowers, tanks, its allies. Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria were collapsing. At home, the German people were starving. Mutinies broke out in the Navy. Workers went on strike. Protests flooded the streets. He fled into exile in the Netherlands, never to return. 2 days later, on November 11, 1980, at exactly 11 a.m., Germany signed the armistice. The war, finally, was over. And the deadly U-boats that terrorized Allied ships at sea. The war was evolving into something monstrous. Millions were thrown into battle, often with little training and even less food. The suffering on both sides was unimaginable. They lived, fought, and died in those holes. The Russian Empire, overwhelmed by losses, poverty, and revolution, withdrew from the war. The old world, the empires of Europe were gone. With fire, it showed the cost of pride, greed, and blind nationalism. It taught us that the world can break, and when it does, no one is safe. Millions died for borders, for emperors, for nothing. And yet their stories are a warning, a lesson we must never forget. The Austro-Hungarian Empire dissolved. The Ottoman Empire broken up. The Russian Empire overthrown. Even the mighty German Empire had fallen. Filipinos served as laborers, port workers, and support troops. We were not directly on the battlefield, but we were in the shadow of the war. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, overthrew the Tsar and signed a peace treaty with Germany. This allowed Germany to shift all its forces to the Western Front, a final push to win the war. Attacks gained only meters, and at the cost of thousands of lives. This was no longer a war of movement. This was a war of attrition. Serbia, where the assassinate connections denied involvement. Austria wanted war, and behind Austria stood Germany, ready to support them no matter what. Serbia had Russia behind it. Russia was allied with France. Germany was blamed for the war, forced to disarm, pay massive reparations, and surrender colonies. Its people, humiliated and angry, sank into poverty and bitterness. France had a pact with Britain. Within weeks, the world collapsed into chaos. The great powers, Britain, France, Germany, or Russia, were engaged in a dangerous game of empire and alliances. Colonies were being gobbled up in Africa and Asia, navies were growing, armies were drilling, diplomats were smiling. But everyone knew, deep down, that something was coming. This is not a movie. This is not fiction. This is the real story of World War I. The Great War, the war that ended empires, redrew borders, and changed the world forever. It started with a single gunshot, but it would take the lives of over 20 million. This is a true story of how it began. Who led it? Why the world went mad? And how humanity barely survived. The world at the dawn of the 20th century was tense. And then, on June 28, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo, a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb named Gavrilo Princip fired 2 bullets that would set the world on fire. July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. One domino fell, then another, and another. Germany declared war on Russia, then France. Germany invaded neutral Belgium to reach France faster. Britain, in defense of Belgium, declared war on Germany. The world was at war, but this wasn't supposed to be a world war. In the early stages of the war, Germany was the most powerful military force in Europe, maybe the world. By the end of 1914, the Western Front had become a stalemate, a vast, mighty, frozen trench system stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, Germany and Austria-Hungary battled Russia in vast, open fields. Back in Germany, the war machine was grinding forward. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming, supplies were running low. And then, in 1917, 2 major events changed everything. First, Russia collapsed. But second, the United States entered the war, angered by Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare, including the sinking of civilian ships like the Lusitania, and outraged by the Zimmermann telegram. Germany, now exhausted and desperate, tried one last massive offensive in 1918, and it almost worked. By the fall of 1918, Germany was breaking apart. Then came the final blow. On November 9, 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II, Emperor of Germany, was forced to abdicate. But what was left behind? Over 20 million dead, another 21 million wounded, entire cities destroyed, landscapes shredded, generations traumatized. In Asia, the effects were more subtle, but real. Japan had used the war to expand its influence, seizing German territories in China and the Pacific. China had joined the Allies, but was humiliated at the peace talks. And the Philippines, under American rule at the time, was used as a strategic military outpost in the Pacific. Then came the Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919. A treaty not of peace, but punishment. The seeds of the next war were already planted. And in the ashes of that broken nation, a new voice would rise. A bitter veteran named Adolf Hitler, who promised to restore Germany's honor. World War I did not end war. It only proved how far humanity could fall. This is not just history. This is memory. And as long as we remember, they did not die in vain.